It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, our guest is CEO Steve Sheinkopf. Steve is a third-generation owner and chief executive officer of Yale Appliance and Lighting based in Boston, Massachusetts. He quite literally went from the bottom to the top, from putting away boxes, wire, and piping in the basement of his father's store to cleaning the light fixtures on the ceiling. Steve has a simple goal. He wants Yale to be the best retail experience anywhere. He attended the A.B. Freeman School of Business at Tulane University. Steve Sheinkopf, welcome into the corner office.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Well, we like to start hearing a little bit about the early years. Where'd you grow up, and what was your family life like?
Well, I grew up in a suburb of Boston in Needham, Massachusetts. I am one of three. I have two sisters. I'm the middle child. We all worked at Yale. I started when I was 7.
Wow.
And, that was the cleaning and light fixtures in the period. That was
I can imagine. And your parents obviously had a pretty big role, obviously, in your upbringing, mom and dad. Tell me a little bit about them. Did dad found the business?
No, it was actually, it was started in 1923. And it was started, and my grandfather and actually one of my best friend's grandparents took it over, I think, in the 30s, I think. And then it was handed over to my dad and uncle. And then my dad and uncle became me in 2003.
Wow, terrific. And how have your parents influenced you growing up? Obviously, work's played a major role, but what are some of the things that they taught you and what was important to them as they raised you and your sisters?
Well, I think education was very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think my father was a very hard worker. And I think he instilled that into all of us.
Both in terms of the hours he worked or also his work ethic?
Oh, I think he worked crazy hours and his work ethic. We're very different. I think my dad is analytically smarter than I am. I think I have a better for me, I think everything has got to be team oriented. If you're going to build a company, you got to have good people around you. He was more or less, one really bright guy, and he didn't rely on too many other people.
Right. More of the sole proprietor getting things set up. Is dad still involved in the business?
No, not really. We talk about it on occasion, but he's one of the few people I know that have been able to retire well.
And enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly. He has a lot of outside interests. He's a competitive bridge player. He's a good golfer. He's a philanthropist. And I think when you retire, this goes into many things. You have to have those outside interests because many times, people just have nothing really to look forward to. And retirement becomes just a waiting game, quite honestly.
Yeah. You mentioned your sisters were involved in the business. Are they still today?
No, my oldest sister moved out and has lived in Nashville for, I think, 30 years. Okay. And my younger sister, became a mother of 2 wonderful kids, and she became a mother, and now she flips houses with her husband.
Okay, got it. So they exited the business early and
Yeah,
you were the last man standing, so to speak.
pretty much.
Who or what were some of your other early influencers in your life growing up, particularly in those elementary, middle school years?
Most of really what most of the people I was I know education's a big part of what you'll ask me. I think, most of the influences I've always read history. And for me, I've kept right up to it up until the present day. And I always looked at different people and what they did well, certainly later in business books as kind of early mentors. Without, my dad played a big role. I was lucky to have, a couple of people who took time to teach me here as well. One of them runs a phenomenally successful furniture store. And I had a guy who used to run a buying co-op who was very analytical and just a wonderful guy who taught me as well. So I would say those two, but basically doing a lot of reading to find out who I wanted to be when I kind of grew into this role.
Yeah, cool. Were they people that you met through your dad? Were they folks that were outside suppliers or vendors, or just people that you met in the community?
Well, one of them was in the appliance business,
Uh-huh.
and the other one was just so phenomenally successful that I just happened to call a secretary and ask for a meeting, and we became friendly ever since. I became a camp counselor in his camp, for
Awesome.
kids with pediatric AIDS for like 4 years.
Wow, cool. What age was that? Was that during high school or junior high?
That was actually when I was 46.
Okay, all right, not too long ago.
He said to me, he goes, he took a phone call and he told me about this camp, and I said, well, if you need somebody, I'd be happy to, I'd be happy to help you. It was a 1 week sleepover for kids that really look forward to it. He called me up and he goes, we're really going to need you. I hung up the phone. I'm thinking, what kind of
What did I get myself into?
And I'm like, who could possibly need me that bad? But it was a wonderful experience. Really
awesome.
wonderful experience.
Awesome. Well, back to your earlier years. Tell us about your student life. Were you a good student in school, kind of middle of the road, struggling?
Well, what's funny is you look at, I'd love to say I was an all A student, but I have to tell you the truth. And I was a really good student on the things that I liked.
That's very common.
I was a great history student. I was a very good English student, and I just absolutely did not get math. To this day, I think I'm the only one in Needham High history to go from level 1 math being the best, like AP math, to level 2 math to level 4 math in a matter of like 6 weeks. So I went from the top to the bottom in just a matter of 6 weeks. I just couldn't understand how algebra was going to help me in my real life.
Yeah.
But I think obviously math, for engineering and all this thing is so critically important. I wish I had given a better effort in the things I wasn't good at,
Right.
sciences and math. But I was more of a English history type of person, liberal arts type of person.
Studied any languages at all? Was that part of your repertoire?
Actually, I took Latin.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really much conversing in Latin. I didn't go to the Vatican until I was like 45, but even then it was way too late.
What about outside of class? Sports, music, theater, and anything in that realm?
Sure. I used to play a lot of racquetball.
Yep.
I've run 10 marathons, done a lot of
Wow.
road races.
Including the Boston Marathon, I presume.
I did Boston 7 times.
Yeah. Okay.
And Boston's a great marathon. So was Chicago, so was New York. Marine Corps in Washington is another great marathon to run too. So I've always stayed physically fit. I've always read a lot as well. I like, certainly food and wine and that type of thing too.
What about entrepreneurial things when you were younger? I mean, obviously, Dad put you to work, it sounds like, at a very early age. But were there other things you did? Paper routes, Christmas sales, car washes, those types of things?
I was always kind of busy working at Yale, which is good insofar as it set me up for what I did now. And it's also
Sure.
bad because I think what I've done is I've tried to educate myself and hire people from outside the industry to be in our industry.
Yeah.
Because really, I mean, the way I see it and the way other people see it is totally different. And that's good. I mean, as long as, the vitals are there, the financials are there, and that you build from that kind of cornerstone of ethics and financials, you're fine. But if entrepreneurially means, working for your future job, then that's pretty much what I did.
It's interesting that you say about hiring people from the outside. We also find that very true in our recruiting business, that looking at parallel industries, provided you've got the qualifications right, a CFO's got to be a CPA, but finding people that have had experience in other industries can be a real godsend to companies that are looking to change and are looking for new ways of doing things. Is that kind of part of your philosophy and why you like to bring people in from outside of retail?
It's funny because some of my best people, like our director of sales was a caterer.
Wow.
And the director of operations came from from the IT industry of a men's warehouse, not men's warehouse, but one of those boot supplier type places. For me in the appliance business, I don't think anybody's going into it. Restaurants have a reputation of coming in and burning out. They're like the kamikazes of business, but nobody's really opened appliance stores really that much. So I really don't have that much of a pool to draw from.
Anyway, right?
So really, the way I've always phrased it with high level people would be, we're in the lifestyle business and the logistics business, and we happen to sell appliances.
Yeah.
So we've been able to get good people. Obviously, you have to work from their viewpoint of, benefits, 401k matching, kind of profit share, competitive salary, and good work environment. But as long as you do that, I think basically a company is a company, really.
So you went on to college. Did Dad and Mom also get their university degree?
Yeah, Dad and Mom went to BU, as did Grandpa.
Wow, okay. So you had history there.
Yeah, they all actually lived in the same town, Brookline. So yeah, I went to Tulane because I knew I was coming back, and
right.
Quite honestly, this is, the college application process wasn't easy because I always wanted to go to Emory, and I visited and didn't like it. So I had to scramble to figure out where I wanted to go next, and I figured New Orleans was as good a place as any.
Oh, it's pretty far from home.
And knowing that I would be coming back, but New Orleans is a wonderful, wonderful place to visit.
Tulane's a great school as well. Did you pick business because you knew you were going to be in business, or tell us a little bit about your decision behind picking a major?
Well, it's funny. I took the business classes because I thought I needed them, but quite honestly, they really weren't relevant. Marketing has never really been relevant, even the way it's taught now. But I loved history. As soon as I could get out of the business school and satisfy my majors, I'd go to history. I took some wonderful classes about the world as other people saw us. Classes like Caribbean revolutions and Spanish civil wars and that type of stuff. I really enjoyed that aspect of college.
What were some of the key lessons you think you took away from some of those? Some of that curriculum that was outside of the business realm?
Well, I think that basically when you look at history, it's taught by those who won it, not by those who didn't.
That's true.
And if you go to places like the Philippines and Vietnam, they have a totally different reality than we do. But it all serves. I mean, the mistakes that were made years and years and years ago, leadership mistakes. You can read about those, and they're relevant even now, of what it's like when you lack humility or get, bad leaders or you don't serve your people or you don't serve your customers, Right.
Now, did you work when you were down at Tulane? Was there other jobs that you took, or were you pretty much a full-time student and, came home on breaks?
I was a full-time student, and every break I had, I went back to work.
Yeah.
I did some odd stuff, but nothing really to speak of.
So no big surprise. The first job you had out of college was back at Yale. Dad was still CEO, I presume, at that time.
Yeah.
What did you step into when you first came back out?
Well, basically what I did was what I thought I should do, which is I got into sales. And, my whole goal was to grow a business. And for me, that was like growing the top line. and that's a good recipe for disaster, really, because I mean, of a different kind of, I've been lucky or unlucky enough to live in very interesting times. In Boston, we had the Great Recession in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
We had a recession in 2001, but the one that killed Boston was 1990. That destroyed the banking and everything else. But really, when you're trying to grow sales, you have to answer the question, do you have the capacity for growth? And I think certainly a lot of people in the appliance business have never really answered that question. They want to grow sales, but they don't have the foundation of customer service, of delivery, of technical support and everything else that will really grow your business. Because you can't really grow the top, especially now when social media will absolutely, if you say you're great and the experience is different nowadays, nowadays it'll kill you. But back then it still hurt. Word of mouth still hurts. So really I became the first customer service rep of the business. And that was a horrible job.
Did you report to Dad, or were there some other folks
at that point in time we didn't talk.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, but no, I'm being facetious, obviously. But I saw the business is the easy stuff is like sales. The hard thing is what you actually take home, which really has to be measured more than obviously sales. Anybody listening to this will know that. But for me, it was I grew the repair business, I grew the customer service business, and and having done that, I have a profound respect for it. It doesn't show up on financials,
right?
But it can be monetized with the opportunities you're able to get because of it.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I blundered into that now. Now it's like you've got to have good customer service, or your reputation and brand is going to suffer for it.
You will make history.
Oh yeah,
and it'll be a footnote.
Bad history, right?
So, did you have people responsibilities early on? Did that take a few years? Tell us about kind of moving into management.
Well, the funny thing is basically, I was given a lot of latitude, which is good and bad, because I think there wasn't any active mentoring back then. Not to say my dad wasn't a good mentor, he was, but I was going down a path that no one else was going.
Yeah, exactly. You were creating new territory.
I was creating new territory. So I was in charge of really a whole scope of things, of new warehousing and new everything that had to do with the operation side of the business. And although I'd like to say I'm good at it, I'm far better on the sales and marketing and side than I was in the operation side. But having done that, I understand it. It's not important as a CEO to know the nuts and bolts of everything. It's important to have a good general viewpoint of everything. And it's good to know when people aren't doing the job, that having done it was like the worst and best thing I could have done, because it was a lot, it was a 7-day week, 6 or 7 day a week, 3-night gig. And it was very tough at that time. Yeah.
When did you first start managing people directly then? Was that in the next job, or did you grow out a customer service department?
No, I was in sales, and I was kind of doing a lot of everything. So I pretty much started managing as soon as I got out of college, which is another recipe for real disaster. Because really, the evolution of really management is being totally transparent, where people can manage themselves. Back then, it was about me telling you what to do. Now it's you basically knowing what to do and me giving you the tools to be able to do it.
What were some of those early leadership lessons you learned?
Oh God, I'm proud to say that if there was a mistake in managing people, I probably made it. I'm sure there's profound examples, but it's everything. It's from hiring the wrong people to hiring the right people and putting them in wrong positions, to hiring the right people and not giving them the right opportunities, to giving the right opportunities to the wrong people. And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, we're all basically in the same business. We're in the people and then service or product business. And if you get that first part wrong, you're probably going to get the next parts wrong too.
Well, it sounds like a lot of trial and error. How did you kind of then evolve your leadership style? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny.
You still have a company, right? I mean, so there had to be some successes.
Yeah, last time I checked. Although you may put this under your cautionary tale recordings. But basically, you know what I did is I went back to what I was good at, was reading and figuring out who I wanted to be from the people I actually respected. And it could have been, a figure in history. It could have been, I read a lot of, those 1-minute manager types, the energy bus, Fish, about how to make the business better. I mean, we sell appliances, which it doesn't sound like the best job, but you can make it the best job. If the guy in the Seattle fish market can make shucking fish good, then I could certainly make selling appliances as good, if not better. And that's what we focused on. And what's what I focused on in environment and being the type of person I wanted to work for. And that took a lot of time. But really, what I think you want to do is first is you want to build a team. And I think William Sheridan said it the best when he had an interview with the New York Times when he said that was the hardest part of what he ever did. And the reporter goes, well, how long does it take to make a really good team? And he goes, 37 years. And
he wasn't done yet.
And the guy goes, the reporter said to him, 37 years, why'd it take so long? And his answer was, because that's how long it takes.
Yeah.
And it only took me about 23.
I love that. And, obviously you've been able to surround yourself with some good people. Do you have a fairly standard, kind of executive team where you've got folks that report to you that kind of go down the line, or is it a pretty flat organization at Yale?
I don't like bureaucracy. I think the farther we get away from the people that are buying our stuff, the worse it gets. So it's a flat organization. It's really a flat organization, even though, there's 175 people working here. And communication is always an issue. There's enough technology out there for us to be able to communicate properly. That said, I have 2 direct reports, one in sales and one in operations. And I have one in marketing as well. I'm in the marketing department.
Yeah, it sounds like it. The customer service kind of evolved to that over time, I presume.
And customer service falls under operations. So in marketing falls under operations, kind of, and sales. So basically, we live to serve, our associates and our customers.
So everybody else is under those 2 or 3 folks, pretty much.
Pretty much, and then under that you have a layer of supervisors. We have a supervisor of fleet, supervisor of customer service, supervisor of technicians, a director of customer support. And then under that, we'll have the concierge support team and their managers. So there's probably about 10 or 12 managers.
Yeah. How do you decide when it's time to micromanage someone and when it's time to kind of stay out of their sandbox?
Well, typically, the more you put things under numbers, the better off you are. And the better off the person is. The more transparent you are.
When you say putting under numbers, like having metrics to specifically measure their results? Having
what they call KPIs, key performing indexes. I mean, the more you take the emotion out of it, the better off you are. And what we try to do is we review KPIs. And I don't micromanage anybody. It's funny because someone asked me my style. Someone asked me my leadership style. So I'm in marketing, and I kind of report to the marketing person. It's kind of a bizarre relationship because I come up with most of the content in the company, and it's his job to deploy it. And I work with our videographer. And so I asked him, he's like a 24-year-old guy, totally different from me, hipster guy. I said to him, just out of curiosity, how would you paraphrase my management style? He goes, well, I call it laid back with expectations. And that's what
How
it is.
Millennial.
Yeah, really. And it's funny because I treat millennial. We have people for anywhere from 22, not including interns, from really 22 to 62 working here, and everybody talks about when you read about it. I mean, how do you treat a millennial? How do you treat a Generation X? How do you treat a Generation Y? How do you treat a baby boomer, late baby boomer? And for me, it's about being transparent, not lying to that person, and giving them their goals and expectations. And when they don't meet those goals, let's have a chat about it. Maybe I'm not giving you the tools. Maybe the systems and processes are such where you can't do what I'm asking you to do. So maybe it's my fault, or maybe it's the wrong person, or maybe the expectations. But there's got to be you build it from the financials, and then you build it back down from there. So if you're in sales is easy, because it's all about sales goals and profitability goals, and we've made that for technicians too, where we have 30 techs on the road. Each one of them has their own P&L. So
everybody has KPIs in the organization, right on down to the first level salesman.
Everybody has to. For delivery guys, it's a combination of not damaging stuff, and
customer service satisfaction or on-time delivery.
NPS is a big one, and not workman's comp issues. And it's funny, the previous guy, because I was out as a CEO for a couple of years, and the guy who took over for me didn't believe in any of that stuff. And we had the year I retook over the company, we had $418,000 worth of workman's comp claims. When we made it part of the KPIs, the workman's comp claims are basically zero, or we'll have some real injuries. I mean, as of kind of like minor stuff, but nothing like someone who takes the summer off or something like that. So everybody has KPIs, and there's something in it for them in terms of once they meet their goals, if we have profit share at the end of that as well, and 401k match. So there's something in it for everybody.
What are your thoughts on the importance of building a company culture, Steve?
Well, I think it's huge, and it's really hard to do, because for that you have to be prepared to fire or let go somebody who doesn't fit that culture. And the culture has nothing to do with a certain type of person. It has to do
or
with...
it may not even be due to performance, right?
No, I had to let go our second best salesman 2 years ago because he was brutal to customers and his fellow staff. And it's just, it's funny because people describe those people as cancer. In many organizations, they let them kind of ruminate and kind of tolerate it. And I've always thought that, if it was real cancer and really in your body, I mean, you'd probably take it out. And that's
you want to cut it out, right?
And it's funny because that energy that you have to discipline and everything else just goes away with that person. And it sets the right example to other people that certain behaviors won't be tolerated. And you mean what you say.
Has the culture changed a bit since from the time Dad was CEO until you running it today?
Yeah, I think Dad was more interested in actually, he wasn't, I mean, my father was a very, very fair, very generous guy. And there's a downside to that, because I think when you talk about being generous and fair to people that don't meet goals, you create entitlements.
Yeah.
I've been able to create better benefits than he has with greater discipline, so everybody benefits. And that's one thing. It's just you have to be fair to everybody, and KPIs are part of it. And being fair means you got to be fair to the organization, and you got to be fair to the individual.
Well, and I think it also makes taking tough choices, like taking out the number 2 salesman if there's abusiveness there, or hitting the numbers but not necessarily conforming to the type of employment atmosphere that you want.
Yeah, and my director of operations always believes that the rank and file will always know more than you will, and that may or may not be the case, but everybody's always looking at that example. if that example is tolerated, then there is no culture that says it's not tolerated. So you have to be really consistent. And as I've always said, I think going from that kind of single proprietorship to being somewhat successful, say at 30 million, making that jump to 50 and then 100 and then 115 or whatever it is, it's really hard because the organization always has to change with it. And oftentimes people are one step behind it instead of one step ahead of it. And that's really the hard part. I mean, shrinking and going through recessions is hard. Growing profitably sometimes can be harder.
What would you say is most unusual or unique about Yale's culture?
Well, certainly in our industry, there isn't really anything like it. What I've tried to make it is kind of like a startup culture, where I think what's unique about us is everybody else has figured out, certainly a lot of my competitors have figured out, there's a direct correlation between sales and profits. And I think always salespeople it's kind of like there's a restaurateur in New York, I forgot his name, where he took tipping out. He's one of the best restaurateurs in the world because he figured out the waiters are making proportionally way more than the chefs, the busboys, and everybody else that makes that organization an organization, right? So what we've done here is certainly sales, and it's a tough job. They make their money. But what we've tried to figure out is how's that ace customer service person, how are they going to make 60, 80, 90 grand, that sort of thing. We have more of an organization, more of a culture on the backside. Typically, a lot of the people in the appliance business, the salespeople are good. They get compensated really well, but there's nothing behind it. And as I know from really bad experience, is that's a trapdoor where you're never going to grow with that kind of structure. It's like building a building on a really small foundation. All you're going to get is a small building. It's just the way it is.
Right. Talk a little bit about hiring. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in?
Well, it depends on who you're hiring for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky to be in the appliance business, right? So I can make anybody into a role. Certainly an appliance salesperson. I can make anybody into a customer service person. So it's not like I'm going out looking for nuclear engineers where if I hire one and train him for like 6 weeks and have him build a nuclear reactor, it's not good for the world. But really what I'm looking for is a work ethic, and I'm looking for a ethic period in a personality type. We can make somebody into that role. What I can't give them is the ability to work hard and work well with others and have good ethics.
How do you interview and hire? Are you involved in that for people beyond kind of your direct reports?
I used to be a lot more involved than I am now. On certain people, on really key hires, I'm involved. And what I'll do is basically I'll take their resume and flip it around. Like if someone says to me, like, they built a company from 3 to 115 million, the question is how. Okay? Take what they say and flip it around as a question. It's okay, this is what you said you did. How did you do it? What were the process you take it? And then what I'll do is I'll do something that a lot of interviews have a hard time with, is to just not say another word until they're finished. Because after they answer the question, it's what comes next that's kind of important.
How so? Give me an example of that.
It's like when people answer a question, they'll add a bunch of stuff onto that answer that may or may not be relevant, but will give you insight into what it is what they actually can be capable of doing,
or their character,
So that's what I'll do is I'll make it a conversation, not a formal. I won't sit down and throw 3 people in front of them and wear my business suit and not crack a smile, because that's not the work environment they're going into. The work environment they're going into is kind of a conversational type of relationship with staff and customers. So that's what you want to see if they can do.
Other than the how-to question, which is a real good one, we use that a lot when we interview executives as well. What's another, maybe 3 3 to 5 minute kind of interview type of question you would ask? If you really wanted to get to the core, it's not a direct report, but maybe it's a top salesperson, or maybe it's someone that's coming in for a new account. If you only had to ask them one or two things, what would that be? What would you focus in on?
Well, salespeople I don't hire as much, and it's really interesting because we're going back and doing something that's kind of odd for salespeople. Now that you mention it, is we're hiring people. The people that seem to be successful with us are the over 50 crowd.
Interesting.
Which people don't hire because although people aren't supposed to say this in big companies, they part of the reason why they don't is the medical. They have more medical issues, and they tier. We have a wellness program, and I believe in all that. But quite honestly, the medical insurers don't really care as much as would they see how your age skews and then make their bets based on that. And really, the questions that I'm going to ask people is putting them in the situation they find themselves in. What was your biggest problem? What was your nightmare? What was your nightmare scenario? What was your nightmare customer? What was the thing that you learned from the most? What was the hardest thing that ever happened to you? Now, they'll answer it two different ways. If they answer it with some superficial kind of nonsense answer, you know that they haven't really handled a problem yet. And if they haven't handled a problem yet, depending on typically, although their experience, then you probably are not interested in that. And then you want a sense of transparency. You want to say, yeah, I messed it up because quite honestly, everybody makes mistakes, and I just want to see how they answer that question.
Yeah, that's a good one, because again, if they've gone through a problem, then they should be able to give you some details, and what you're looking for is their thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to live across the hall from a guy who was really high up with Arthur Andersen Consulting before it was Accenture, and he used to give me some of the questions they asked, like how many phone calls were made in a day, or what if you had this vessel that turned water into oil? What would you do? And I'm like, Jesus, I'm looking for a job selling software here, not selling oil. But, I want to know from their personal experience what it is, what makes them tick. And that's I've always found that to be a good question to ask.
Well, Steve, we're just about out of time, but we do have one last question we'd like to ask everyone. And, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone? A lot of our listeners are in the middle market, maybe they're middle management, maybe they're on their way to the C-suite, but, they've got their eyes on making history themselves. What would you say to someone, kind of early career or mid-career in terms of, their own journey to the corner office?
Okay. If you've listened this far, you may have, there's some things don't always go as they're planned. You're gonna make mistakes. The question is not whether you're gonna make mistakes. The question is whether you're gonna learn from it. The question is whether you're gonna persevere. And the bigger you build it, the more you need help. And if you're the smartest guy or girl in the room, something's wrong, because no one can be the smartest in IT, sales, marketing, finance, accounting, law, or whatever the problems that you have. And so really what it comes down to is, do you have a vision that's good? And if it starts to fail, that's fine. Do you have the ability to change course? Do you have the ability to build a team? And do you have the ability, first and foremost, to persevere? And that's the real thing. I'm going on my 32nd year here, and not all of them were good.
Sure.
But I learned something from each and every one of them. And honestly, that bad job that I had in customer service for 5 to 7 years gave me greater insights than all the good stuff I've done, all the good years that came afterwards. So certainly have empathy for the people in the line, understand who they are, and make sure that everybody in your organization is fairly compensated. Make everything about numbers, and that way it doesn't have to be about emotions, and that way everyone will see you coming.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you have to take some risks and make some mistakes, right? That's kind of how we grow.
Yeah. Boy, is it ever.
Steve Sheinkopf, thank you so much. We've been really appreciated your journey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Handley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.